welcome to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director of Polaris Capital Advisors, and I am joined, as always, by the wonderful and amazing David Kroll of Mortgage Network. And we are here to discuss all things where your money matters. This week, we are going to sort of start big and stay big, I think, is sort of, big picture issues. I wanted to give a brief overview of where the markets are, because that's usually what most folks are immediately interested in. We're looking at the stock market these days. We've had a few little gyrations, a little bit more than we've had for the last couple of weeks, I guess. A couple of rather large down days, if you will, but on a relative, basis, it has not been that big. Mostly sparked, at least anecdotally, by some of our political gyrations and words of wisdom that have come out of Washington that sparked a little bit of volatility. But by and large, markets are still sort of going in a sideways holding pattern, waiting to see, are we actually going to have any massive or meaningful, I should say, tax reform, or is that not going to happen? We certainly have lots and lots of other reform happening right now, and I think the markets are saying, okay, wait a second, let's take a break here and see what this is actually going to mean. And
what's real, what's not, what's words and intentions versus realities.
Right. I mean, if we're seeing Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act being cut, what's that going to mean and to who? And then what's the replacement going to be and what does that mean and to who? So there's lots of questions there. Today, for example, there's speculation that the Dodd-Frank Act, which was enacted after the Great Recession or as a result of the Great Recession, is most likely also going to be either weakened or disbanded completely. That's a big question there for banks, big banks and small banks alike. It could be phenomenal for them, but if there is no regulation, there's probably going to be something else put in place. So it'll just be interesting to see what happens with each of these. With the stroke of the pen that's happening very fast, I think it's leaving a lot of analysts, market watchers questioning, we definitely expected that financials would do well, oil would do, or energy would do well, defense would do well, and that industrials would do well with the Trump presidency. Those have all run up very nicely for the last several months, if not weeks. And now it's sort of standing still saying, okay, now what?
And I think that's the important thing. They've run up on the basis of speculation. They've run up because people think that a Trump presidency would favor those sectors. It now is a long while before we'll see the congressional action and the legislative action to back up a lot of the.
You're hearing sort of crickets in Washington behind
the executive
behind
actions. The executive actions are flourishes. They are, with a few exceptions, but for the most part, they are statements of intent. This is where I want us to go. Well, that's great.
Then there's a great big gray area there
of how you get there.
Exactly.
And who's got to help and so forth. Dodd-Frank is extremely, extremely complex. There are many facets to it. There's pluses and minuses and pros and cons, just like there is in any massive piece of legislation. This piece of legislation, Dodd-Frank, remember, came out of the greatest real estate recession of all time and the second greatest economic recession in 2008. And I'm in the banking business. We customarily, down to the last man, hate Dodd-Frank because of all the regulations. Right. However, even I have to admit that
there are some good checks and balances.
Yeah, without it, we banks ran the country into the ditch.
And that's definitely, that could be a topic for a future show for sure, where we can dig into that to see what they're actually going to do, because if that goes away, it could become a free-for-all again.
Exactly.
But as far as what this means to you at this point, probably nothing, because it really doesn't mean change any of your investment allocations. It doesn't mean run for the hill. No. It doesn't mean that you need to go to bonds or cash. It just basically means sort of watch and see. But really, there's no real impetus right now to make any big changes based on what we're seeing happening in the markets or in Washington, because we just don't know yet.
That's correct.
But what it could mean ultimately for you is going to be more incremental things. Like, for example, if the mortgage market changes and there's more products and services that open up there. It could mean the same thing in the investment market. It could mean that there's more products and services that open up there that you can take advantage of, but it's unlikely that there's going to be a big drastic change at least right now.
At least right now, and it's
It could I'm sorry, I was going to say it could also make a difference in your pocketbook with what goes on with Obamacare and whatever sort of transitions happen there. That will impact you most likely more so than these broad strokes of the pen right now, but we won't know what that is for months, if not a few years.
In months, if not a year or two. The most conservative, well, let's not use the most conservative, the most aggressive exponents of change to specifically Obamacare reckon that it will take 3 to 4 years to unwind and wind into an alternative system. What that really means, when you get down to the particulars, is that there is no one thing that gets canceled and one big new thing that gets put in place. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bits and pieces that need to be tinkered with and changed. I mean, it's a little bit like changing the direction of an ocean liner. It happens slowly, and you have to be obviously well aware that there's 30 million people impacted. So it only takes one of those impacted people on television to freeze everybody in place. You know, oh my God, my kid's dying because of what you just did, or oh my God, my kid's dying because of what you just didn't do. And in our very
media-centric world, yeah.
Media-centric world, everything comes to a halt. So these, even with strong policy, and certainly Mr. Trump is a strong statement for his own policies, even with a strong policy, change comes incrementally.
Right.
Yeah, it just does.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, but certainly right now is sort of in this sideways pattern that, as they say, some people say this is a trader's market. It probably with some portion of your funds, it could be the speculative portion, because we do not know what's going to happen with the strokes of the pen here coming down the pike. I think there are a lot more people that are sort of looking at the broad global picture and broad sectors as opposed to individuals because
well,
of that.
Example of that is this week, last week, the week before, the week before that, the week before that, we both stood here and said, well, you know, there's following winds. There's winds pushing interest rates higher. The market got a little bit ahead of the Fed, but certainly Janet Yellen was on Janice?
Janet, you're good.
Janet Yellen.
Jan.
Jan to her friends, right? She was on record as saying that the Fed would most likely be increasing rates 3 times in 2016.
Which is strange. That's not normal. It's become normal for her, but that's not the normal Fed speak. Usually it's okay, we're going to see what it is next time too. But
that's
they've
right.
been bold-faced.
And they've been very careful in the past to not influence markets, or to try not to influence markets. And they were right out there. We're going to be increasing rates 3 times. Well, the Fed meeting occurred. It was a couple this week, couple days ago, Tuesday, Wednesday, and no rate increase. And that just was lost in the news of the day. It was lost between Trump's 10 o'clock tweet and his 2 o'clock tweet. You know, it was literally lost during the day.
Which that
and
used to be something
that
in our business you would actually sit around and wait for it that week and say, okay, this is happening. They're going to report on Wednesday
look,
at
it's
2.
9:30 at 10
Tuesday
o'clock.
at 2. Yes, this is coming out. I can't wait to see the highlights of the minutes. We'd look forward to that kind of, it's exciting. And
the Fed has, this is interesting in 2 ways. One is that the Fed didn't increase rates like that we thought they would. The second is the non-reaction in the market indicates that the Fed really is a bystander for the time being, and maybe for the long haul, in terms of its influence on economic policy.
And in addition to that, globally, you're still seeing pretty much every other developed nation either standing where they are with rates, definitely not talking about increasing rates, definitely not. I mean, it's still either a question of, are we going to come up with some other sort of stimulus, or are we keeping rates the same? We would be the only nation that's even looking at doing something like that.
Something like that. And then the other indicator that came out was this morning, the jobs report came out. We added, as an economy, 227,000 jobs. Economists thought we were going to add $180,000 jobs. That's good news. That's many, 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 many months in a row where we've added jobs. This is the last of Obama's months, because this is through the end of January. And starting next week, Mr. Trump, you own the economy.
All right, well, we have a whole another half of this show that we'll be right back with. Please stick with us. We'll be back with more Money Matters.